Hello and welcome to On It Not In It interview series. I'm your host, Todd Eppert, and today I'm joined by Lee Salisbury, who is the founder and chief creative officer at Unit 19. Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief background as to who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Lee, as you said. I've run a creative agency specializing in branding and creative direction. So, like all things creative on the digital side and websites and apps and user experience and strategy and all of that. I started it when I graduated design, actually, when I was in design school officially. So, I started it 20 years ago this year, back in 2003.
Awesome, thank you. So, just curious, you came out of design school and jumped right into business on your own. What was the big kicker for you to start the entrepreneurial business or take the entrepreneurial leap?
Well, I think the part that got me to start my own business was I was a waiter, and then I realized that I was going to design school and I might as well get some design clients because that paid better than waiting tables. And then that ended up being good and got good clients, and they got better clients and better clients. And then I had a couple internships, and then I lived and worked in Zurich, Switzerland at the end of my collegiate career. And I was at the point where I was making more money than if I got a quote unquote real job, and decided to just, see how long that lasted. And, 20 years later, tons of happy clients and like enjoy who we work with and like care deeply about design, and a lot of it comes down to education because visual maturity is not something that people are just given, right? And digital maturity and all these other things, like it's something that people learn over time or with somebody who can Sherpa them through that process.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love hearing the stories of how people get started and why. Some people make the business plan, it's a second career. In your case, you're in school, you're like, yeah, I could probably make some money at this. And your clients literally pulled you into your own business, which is pretty cool.
Mhm. Yep.
So thinking about those early days, what are one or two significant challenges that you had to face early on? And what did you do to overcome it so that you could survive for 20 years, which congratulations, by the way.
Thanks. I don't know. I think I was pretty stupid when I started out, right? Like you don't know what you don't know type of thing. So I think some of the hardest lessons that were learned were around when to say no, right? Like a lot of times people talk about that and it's like, well, I've never learned how to when to say no. Everybody should learn how to say no. People who say yes too much end up being like, less happy, right? Like in general. So I learned that, uh, luckily not the hard way, but everybody has like bumps in the road where you don't take the right client or the right needs or the right timing or the right, whatever it is, contract. I think those are probably some of the biggest. That coupled with the fact that people, including my teachers in design school, told me that the digital world was not what I should get into because it was more about traditional design and print design and book design and all this. And I was very, very adamant that they were 100% wrong and that this whole digital world was going to, explode even more. Now, keep in mind the internship that I was talking about was actually at CompuServe, which was based here in Columbus, which was like old school, right? So they're CompuServe, but it was MapQuest, ICQ, as well as AOL Instant Messenger. Were some of the things that were housed in the building that I was working in. So
Yeah, that's a great story about the whole, like your teacher's telling you to go one way. I used to work for an entrepreneur, did some business consulting, and I remember him telling us that when he was in business school, he wrote a paper about his business idea and he got a C on it. And 15 years later, he's got an agency with 20 employees, and it's going very, very well. And so that's all often very, very common that the problem presents itself, and the entrepreneur that figures out how to solve that problem creates the business around that new opportunity. Instead of seeing it as oh, nothing's going to change, or it's a problem, it's an opportunity, right? So that's great, Lee.
totally.
So just curious, it's been 20 years. What challenges are you facing today?
Oh, lots of challenges. I think that they're a little bit humorous because I tell people this a lot. I have successfully run a business for 20 years in the dumbest way or the hardest way possible, is what I tell people. And it's because I have no sales funnel. I do no marketing. I do no outreach. I do no cold emailing or cold calling. It is my business plan then is the same as my business plan now, which is be a good person, be helpful, and really have quality work, right? Work with quality people, just be quality in general, because there's a lot of times people just don't, they might not know, or they've never had that experience, or they don't think that they deserve it, or they don't know what that means. So I think that a lot of times when that is such a big change for them, it ends up being a marketable thing where they're just like, hey, like these guys have helped us out in the past. Why don't we hit them up again? And we've seen that be the case, right? Like but once again, it is hellaciously dumb.
Okay.
But
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, it ends up working for me because my goal is not the quantity game, it's the quality game.
Yeah, so it sounds like your business is built on repeat and maybe client referrals. Does that sound right to you?
Yep.
Yeah, those are king. It's really hard to beat a strong client referral. And so, I'll go back to what you started with in the beginning, learning when to say no. Clearly, early on, a lot of people want to say yes to everybody because you're trying to make money. But clearly, early on, you realize that might be a problem. And so maybe you did some ideal client targeting, or maybe you learned to say no to the wrong people for your agency so that you could build the right way, which has led to high quality work, high quality referrals. So often small business owners are afraid to say no, and it leads them into all these other issues. And because they do subpar work, they don't get those client referrals, they don't get that repeat business, and then they're stuck on the marketing treadwheel. How do I fill my funnel, right? So it's great to hear that story. Thanks for sharing that, Lee. So what are some common misconceptions about running a business that you would share with our listeners, and how do you address them?
Ooh. I think the biggest common misconception that I think I've talked to, I don't know, 100+ people about is that so if you go into school for design, like I did, right? People often think that you need to be the best designer to own the best design firm.
Mm.
That is, I don't think is the case, right? Because if you're not good at business, if you're not good at contract, if you're not good at reading people, if you're not good at communication, if you're not good at anything you don't want to pay somebody to do, right? You're probably not going to be in business for very long. And I think that that's the reason why I forget what the stat is, but there's, most of companies fail, right? And I think it's part of that, somewhere in there. Definitely is probably the biggest misconception.
Right. And actually, you're talking about the reason this podcast exists. So, On It, Not In It is speaking specifically to the fact that when we get tied up in what I call the technician world, to quote Michael Gerber, you're working in your business. And you might have to do that for a little while. But if you really want to grow a successful business, you got to work on it. You got to learn how to sell and lead and communicate, not just be a designer in your case, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can build a nice lifestyle business as a great designer, but it's really hard to maintain that nice lifestyle when you're trying to grow and trying to add people if you stay in that just designer space.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally.
Right. Awesome. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks for using giving me a way to use my term, on it, not in it. So things evolve. I mean, we just came out of one of the most surprising situations ever last 3 years. But there's always evolving business landscape. So we shouldn't just point at the last 3 years and go, well, the pandemic destroyed my business. It's the evolution of time and things that you already mentioned. One that happened significantly in your industry went from paper and content to digital, right? So in the constantly evolving business landscape, how do you stay adaptable and open to change?
I think it's more of a way of life, right? Like there's people that are static people and there's people that are dynamic people. And it's hard for those people to cross that big void. I mean, I couldn't be static, right? If I was static in my convictions with X, Y, and Z, then that would mean that everything would just pass me by, right? And that is fine. I have a high school reunion coming up this weekend, and some of the people that I went to high school with are very static. Some of the people are very dynamic, and it's very interesting to see, where the happiness quotient happens there too, right? And that
Yep.
doesn't mean that either can't be happy. Like that's not the point. But I think it's just knowing which lane you want to be in and what lane you know should be in slash like we're destined to be in or whatnot. I think is something interesting, you know, that people don't often talk about.
Yeah, so it's a mindset and it's almost a behavior is what I hear you saying,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm,
it can be difficult to cross those tracks of that behavior style.
mhm.
Yep. No, I would agree. And I would compare it to the fact that there are people in the world that really look at the competitive landscape and they see red ocean, right? I got to take your, we're all in the same pool swimming. It's the people that get out in the big blue ocean that
I'm a
really
blue
do well.
ocean guy. Yeah, totally.
Yep.
I
Big
don't,
blue
yeah, I
ocean.
don't believe it. Yeah, but that's kind of a law of attraction, right? Like, I mean, you should put those things out that like instead of being fear-based or whatnot, right? Like make the thing that gravitates people towards that to be like, well, you know, I might not have a project right now, but I want to talk to somebody about it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I talk to people all the time. I mean, I call it design therapy. Like I should start a business, this design therapy, because a lot of times people are like, man, we've been going through this thing forever. And I just don't know how we're going to get through this like website or brand or digital thing or ecosystem or Shopify implementation or whatever. And it's like, well, let's talk about it. Like, why are you what? And usually it comes down to change, right? Like, but I'm used to this. And it's like, okay, well, let's make a list. Let's show how these things are better and how these things are worse. And then it's like, oh, well, it is a therapeutic type of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. I love design therapy. That's maybe that's a new industry that you've just created. And
Yeah, you
that's
know, they like,
so all right, we've talked about past, we've talked about current. Now, if you could take a glimpse into the future, where do you see the business in call it a year to 3 years?
you know, it's interesting. I think I've been thinking about that a ton, especially with the whole like AI thing. Like the stat that I saw today was that 44% of every job that exists will be influenced by AI, which is, I mean, that's interesting. I am extremely nerdy and I've been on the topic for a while and I've been in Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and ChatGPT and like a bunch of the things. Um, I think that it already is influenced by it because we're already being able to use, you know, those tools for generation of images and whatnot, as opposed to like stock photography, right? Like stock photography is it is what it is. Like it's a means to the end, and it's like, hey, I want to put something on the site and make it feel a certain way. But when you're actually able to conjure those images in a way that ends up being, you know, specific to your collective experience, right? Because the things that I might describe X, Y, and Z are entirely different than what you would use, right? And that, I mean, that is creativity as well. I think it's just going to come down to kind of where those worlds collide and where we can start inputting data and then emotional intelligence and then BI tools and all together to be able to start seeing where, you know, things go in the digital world as well as non-digital world as well as virtual worlds and all of those other things, because you know we've been like taunted by AR and VR for quite a while, right? Like I think I got the PlayStation VR when it came out however many years ago, but it's been a while, right?
Yeah.
And that whole world is kind of like still around, right? But it hasn't like fully matured, and a lot of people are very not sure of it. But I still feel like nobody has used it, which is like odd, right? Like, have you used any VR, AR, anything?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So we're in the, you know, that camp of people that have done it. But I do think that that's going to have probably the probably more profound impact from AI than anything that's ever happened in the history of everything that we know it. You know, definitely more than electricity, definitely more than like I think when I talk to people about it, it's more remember when there was dial up, you know, like if I need to get out my cane, remember when there was dial up, you know, like when you had to get off the phone because somebody needed to use the internet. That was a
Yes.
big jump. I mean, that was a quite big jump, right? Like we went from there to being able like everything was instant. I just think that the whole AI thing, you know, I could answer that with other answers as well. But, you know, as far as the largest like impact of that, I definitely think that that's that takes the cake.
Yeah, you're talking about VR and AI and all the things that are coming. I always say that Hollywood figures it out a few years before the rest of us do, but I'm still waiting to get my computer where I can literally blast out the assembly like Tony Stark and Iron Man and throw around parts and move stuff around and move my files. And I'm still waiting for that. I would love it. I don't know if it exists yet. It probably does. It's just not readily available to the public.
Yeah, it does. I think it's called the second screen experience or whatnot. And when you look at it, then like you can look and add another monitor to the monitor that's in front of you. And it seems very odd. I haven't used that or downloaded any demos, but it in due time.
Right, exactly. When it's mainstream, it'll be they get the early adopters, you get the mainstream kind of things. So all right, so one final question for you. So knowing what you know today, what advice would you offer to aspiring entrepreneurs who are just starting their journey?
What would I advise people who are just starting their journey? I don't know. I don't think I can answer that question easily.
Okay. Maybe we could encapsulate everything that you said, right? You should say, be open to change, pay attention to industry changes that are happening around you and be flexible, right? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but these are things you just said.
Yeah. I mean, those are valid. I just take it kind of, it's a serious question, right? Like, and you want to be able to give like serious things. And I don't think that what I said was like flippant by any means, but I think that it's make sure that you surround yourself with the like there's like the top 5 people that you surround yourself with are the ones that you become, right? That's the type of thing. So I think make sure you have other people that have not aspirations, not entrepreneurs. There's a big difference between entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in my mind. So surround yourself with people that have done it, are doing it, and that you can kind of make that village, because I am a very, very big, believer in the fact that the people that you surround yourself with definitely influence you and your drive and your ambitions and your, all of that stuff.
Perfect.
That would be my answer. I had to think about it for a second, but
that's okay. That's great advice. So so don't do it alone, right? Get good people around you that have done it before, that can help you along, that can mentor, answer questions, maybe have a skill set that you don't bring to the table, whether it's accounting or attorney work, things like that, right? Good folks around you that can help you not step in the big holes that you're about to, because everybody does, right?
Well, and I think that like some of that, which I think blends into your world a little bit, is like, don't be afraid of coaching, right? I think sometimes people have this like stigma of like, oh, well, I can't get help from somebody. Like, I have spent a ton of time and effort in coaching in specific areas because I think specific areas are what work best for me. But I know numerous other people that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in coaching. And you know what they all say, and what I would say too, that can be extremely beneficial if you are wanting it. Not that you feel cornered and that it's your only way out, because that's probably not the right time to do that. Like when you get to the very end of the rope. But if if you have things that you're wanting to do, and specifically, I think the accountability buddy, I like using that word. It's just but it's nice, right? Like, I mean, a lot of times people cannot be accountable and they need somebody to just hold them accountable, right? So I think that coupled with like a network of people where they can talk to others that are in the similar situation and then can just kind of get that out. I don't know. That's probably like the most not taboo, right? But like people get really shy talking about it because they're like, oh, I'm supposed to know this by myself. Like, listen, I don't know lots of things, lots and lots and lots of things. But if that has a linchpin of me making or breaking like a sector of my business or a way in which I'm going to go about it or what have you, it's definitely worth its weight in gold.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it, Lee. So, Lee, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate the time. It was great meeting you and learning more about your entrepreneurial journey, as well as what your business does. Thank you for serving the communities that you do and the incredible brands that you do. Check out the things he's done in the past. But to everyone watching, I look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Thanks again, Lee.
Thanks, Todd.